Hey everyone, and welcome to today's video where we are going to rank some of the strongest artists in Elan. You might already have noticed that this is a very different type of video than we usually do. Since it's such a fun topic, I thought it would be fun to do it in a more informal way, more conversational. So let's see how it goes. I haven't made a video like this before. Now, obviously, we're going to go through characters from Riyria Revelations, from Legends of the First Empire, and from Elan, so there definitely will be some spoilers for those. Also, another fun thing, I did share this list with a bunch of people on Discord, on Reddit, and let them rank it as well. I haven't seen the final rankings that they have given it, but at the end of this video, we will go through, look and see how the community ranked them, maybe compared to how I ranked them. And finally, to do this ranking, I am using Tier Maker. I'm going to make this available to anyone that wants to do it themselves. I'll put a link in the description. So definitely, if you have some time, want to rank them yourself, feel free to. All right, so let's get into it. A few ground rules, though. I am going to be ranking these characters based on the strongest we see them in the book. So we're not going to be talking about, Legends Mwandale. We're going to talk about Revelations Mwandale. I'm also not including any gods, Asira, or immortals in here. These are all mortal artists. And then to rank them, we're going to look at their raw power. We're going to look at their knowledge and competence. Look at some of the displays of powers that the different characters have used. But enough talking, let's get into it. So on the weak level, he's a fan favorite, but I am going to put Gifford down here just because we don't see him do a lot. We see he starts to get some training, but really struggles in the beginning with, even the simplest use. We do see him, his one big feat is really starting the fire at Perdif, where he basically explodes half the town. Obviously, this was a big display of power, but it's not something that took a lot of control, and we don't see him really repeat that on Elan, at least. Obviously, he is able to remake a stone bridge in Pyre, in Nifril, but the art is really different, it seems, in Pyre, so I don't think we can put too much stock in that. So Gifford's going to be down here. And now we're going to go straight up to average. We don't see a lot of weak artists in the books, but we're going to put Minister Dre, one of the newest characters from Elan. Obviously, he's pretty good at disguising himself. He does that for quite a long time. We see him protect Prince Nordian from Ruby by putting out the fire, though he does get some support from the other artists pretty quickly. We see him stand against Mwandale, but again, he had several other artists there to help him, and even then, they didn't think they could take down Mwandale without too much destruction to really make it worth it. So we don't see Minister Dre much, even though he is going to be one of the original official Senslers of the Empire. Right above Dre, we're going to put fellow bookmate Ruby. So Ruby is a completely untrained artist, but she does have a lot of raw power. Obviously, when she first used the art, she wasn't even trying to, just instinct, making things explode, people explode. By the time we see her in the Mystic Wood, she definitely has some more control over her power. And we do see her do some interesting things, such as how she could sense that Kyle was more than just a man when she looked at him. That's something we don't see other artists even do at other times in the books. She could also sense that Mwandale was hiding behind a disguise. And it doesn't seem like she really has to focus too much or strain too much on individual weaves. Interestingly, it doesn't seem like she has to use her hands as much as other artists. when she weaves. Obviously, being completely self-trained and just going on instinct, she's going to do things very differently. But maybe her style would have been helpful to some artists who had no hands later. Also, one thing that stood out to me was when the monks at the Dibben Monastery, or the artists there, came to stop her. They said something like, "You can't fight all of us," which really insinuates that she could take one or a couple of them all by herself. So a lot of raw power, just no training. Next, I am going to put Kel Jared. And let's talk about some of his exploits, because he actually has quite a few. He is the Kel of Avampartha, which basically means he's the keeper. Which is a pretty big deal among the Mirrleaf. We do see him doing creation weaves when he creates the strawberry for Mwandale. And the creation weave is a pretty important one that we'll probably talk about with some other characters on this list, just because it is one of the harder weaves, because it takes a lot of power to be able to pluck Troth, the Court of Creation. Grindel considered Jared to be one of his only rivals. Arian considers Jared to be one of, I think, only 3 Mirrleaf that are stronger than herself. Jared was taught by the original Mirrleaf, Phenelaeus, and Jared also taught Grindel. We know that he can use the art to communicate far away, which he does with Mwandale and teaches him. Jared also has clairvoyance, meaning he can see far away, and he can also send strikes with the art from long distances, such as when he attacked the doll. Though it was pointed out he can't use clairvoyance and those long distance strikes at the same time. So I've kind of gone on about how strong he is. So the question is, why is he an average and not legend or demigod? And the reason for that is really, we got the last 2 books in the Legend series, Age of Death and Age of Empire, where we see he's kind of faking a lot of it. The reason that he is strong is because he's able to use the strength of the Nidwalden River and the falls, along with the focusing power of Avampartha. And when the Nidwalden is basically stopped by another artist in Age of Empire, he basically becomes impotent. He has no raw power at that point. Now, you could theorize that perhaps earlier in his life, when he had more passion and emotion, that perhaps he did have some more raw power to get to where he was later. But we see Jared as a very old Frey with very little raw power at that point. So he's only going to be average. Right above him, we are going to put Vidar, who is another Mirrleaf. And Vidar, honestly, we don't know a ton about his skills. We know that he was the senior counselor member of the Mirrleaf, so that's a quite high position to have among the magic-wielding Frey tribe. So you would think that he would be a stronger than average at least. Though, of course, it could just be that he's a good politician. We don't know. So based on that, I'm going to put him at the high end of average. All right, let's go up to the next above average. And the first person I'm going to put is someone from Revelations, finally, which is Arista. Arista, like some that we've already talked about, is heavily self-taught. In the beginning of Revelations, she can do little to nothing. You know, she's able to boil some water, but she grows very quickly, goes from boiling water to boiling some Surret Knight's blood. And then a few books later, by the time we get to Persepliquus, she's grown to be really strong. Obviously, when they're on the ship, she's able to destroy the Gazelle ship and almost destroys her own ship, losing power. But a lot of raw power there. When they finally get to Persepliquus with all the Gazelle, she does some things like burns hundreds of arrows mid-flight, something the Spider Corps would have been done well to learn a couple thousand years earlier. She also matches a couple Gazelle Oberdazas at once, even though she doesn't really know what's going on. And she also learns to heal quite well for being self-taught. As obviously, she heals Hadrian in the final battle. She also almost pulls Ulrich back from death as well. So all in all, Arista has a lot of raw power. And she's probably one of the few characters on this list that we definitely don't see her at her prime. You know, if we got to see Arista maybe a couple years later, even a couple decades later, she might be way higher on this list. She still has a lot to learn, a lot to grow into, but she has a lot of potential. All right, right above her, we are going to put Macaretta. So Macaretta is obviously one of the Mirrorleaf. She was one of Arian's students at the Academy of the Art in Estremnadon. We know she was part of the Grey Cloaks, and when they attacked, it said that she killed 5 Mirrorleaf, which is pretty impressive, though obviously she had the element of surprise. And I believe it said that she probably would have taken Lothian out too in that attack if it wasn't for Sign. And then later, she obviously took out Sign, though again, she had the element of surprise. Macaretta is a quite young Mirrorleaf as well, so given what she did, it seems like she was definitely a stronger than average Mirrorleaf, probably had a lot more potential as well. And then speaking of Sign, I'm going to put her right above Macaretta. Again, we don't see Sign do a ton, but we know she was renowned for being really quick with the art. She saved Lothian during the Grey Cloak Rebellion by putting up a shield. She also was killed by Macaretta, but Macaretta had completely the element of surprise, and even then, Sign was able to raise a shield and even get a hit on Macaretta as she was dying. And then I think to round out the above average level, I'm going to put Fane Lothian. I think some people may disagree. I'm guessing when we look at the end, some people have Fane Lothian higher on this list, as he was Fane of the Fray. Though, honestly, I think that probably had a little bit more to do with him being Fenelaus' son. And when he actually had his duel for Faneship, he had to Fane Zephyrin, who didn't have the art at all. So he didn't have to be the strongest Mirrorleaf to win that duel. I believe it was said that he wasn't half the artist that Fenelaus was, but that's not a huge put down given how strong Fenelaus actually was. And Lothian probably got quite a bit of training from Fenelaus. And then during the war, he's at the Battle of Granford. We don't see him do anything amazing there. Same thing during both of the attacks on him, during the Grey Cloak Rebellion attack and during the attack by Macaretta and Wandale. We just don't see him do anything particularly amazing. Arian does think that Fane Lothian is stronger than her, though I think there's probably a little bit of humility in that, and probably a little bit she's just overestimating his ability with him being Fane. All right, let's get into the really strong characters now. The first person I'm going to put at the legend is Grendel. So Grendel was renowned among the Mirrorleaf. He won the annual Granthium Art Tournament, I believe that was the name, and he won it year after year after year, as far back as anybody could remember. So he was certainly one of the strongest Mirrorleaf at the time and showed that. He also had some of the best training. I mean, he was taught by Peridian, he was taught by Jared, and he even got some advice and training from Trylos. And I think that's something that's going to be reoccurring. A couple characters on this list got training by Trylos, and being trained by one of the Aesira, who definitely knows more about the art than anybody else on this list, is definitely a benefit. It's thought he actually doesn't know how to do a creation weave, so that puts him down a little bit, though we know he can do clairvoyance. And when he is finally defeated, I mean, he's overwhelmed by Arian, who's super strong,
Suri, who's super strong, and he was caught by surprise by Wraith, who had his shield with the Orenfar, which Grendel might not have even realized that the Orenfar was a thing. So not very fair there, but he definitely put up a fight against all those people and still held his own. So he is going in the Legends section. Right next to him, probably really close in power, is Arian. Arian, she's a ranked member of the Mirrorleaf, kind of renowned for how many different weaves she could hold and create as once. She was trained by Fenelaus, and obviously Fenelaus nicknamed her the Swift of Mind. Arian herself, interestingly, thought of herself, as the fourth strongest Mirrorleaf at the time, behind Lothian, Jared, and Grendel. She was certainly stronger than Jared, as we saw. She almost certainly, I think, was stronger than Lothian as well. Grendel, that probably would have been a pretty close fight. And obviously, when we saw that they did fight, Grendel did get the upper hand, but it wasn't really a fair fight since Arian was having to hold back and Grendel wasn't. And now for kind of a wild card here. I haven't talked about Peridian yet, and I'm going to put Peridian next. So Peridian, for people that don't remember, Peridian was Lothian's first son, so Mwandale's older brother, and Peridian died before the Legends series even occurred. So everything we know about him is just hearsay from other characters. But if we go through the things he did, they're pretty impressive. He established the Academy of the Art in Estremnadon, which is the school that teaches the Mirrorleaf. He taught both Arian and Grendel. Lothian described Peridian as almost perfect. And obviously we know Lothian values power and strength. And so for him to say his son was, almost perfect, definitely weighs in that Peridian was quite strong. Peridian did die, it was said, alone with Grendel while trying something with the art. While it was never outright stated, I think pretty much everyone can guess that Grendel killed him because Grendel saw him as a rival. Now, I guess you could argue that Grendel just saw him as a rival because he was the Fane's son, but also, you can guess that he saw him as a rival because he was so strong in the art. Treya says Peridian was a great artist. Peridian was probably trained by Fenelaus. And then one of the strongest arguments for him being so high, and something I actually missed the first time that I read through the Legend series, was that Peridian didn't just establish the Academy of the Art. He actually used creation to build the actual academy itself. And so far, when we're talking about the creation weave, none of the characters we've talked about have been able to do such a feat with creation. And so I think that puts him quite high. So again, Peridian, his exploits could be overstated and maybe he isn't that strong, but my gut feeling is that he is at least strong legend. He may even be demigod. We just don't know because we never actually got to see him in action. All right, and the last character I'm going to put at the top of the Legends category is Esarhaddon. So Esarhaddon, we see him in Revelations. Obviously, Revelations was not his prime. His prime is going to be during the book of Esarhaddon that we get in less than 1 year. So that's very exciting that we're going to get that book soon. But since we had flashbacks in Revelations to Esarhaddon, 1,000 years earlier during that time, that's where I'm going to take him because that's when he was in his prime. So let's go through what he did at that time. Obviously, he was the youngest member of the Censor Council, so a lot of talent from a young age. He was, again, taught by Trylos, aka Yolruk, so learned from the master there. With Trylos' help and guidance, he created the medallions, that the heir had, which, that may be the most complicated weave we see. Maybe it's comparable to creating a Galarbrin, but it also might be much more complicated when you talk about, the luck factor it has and the repelling the art factor. That's quite a weave. And then obviously the big one, destroying Persepliquus. And he did that with Wandelay probably trying to stop him. So, destroying an entire capital city, that's a huge display of power. So we're going to put him at legend. We're probably going to learn a lot more about that in less than a year, though. So we'll see what we think about Esarhaddon at that time. All right, next, we're going to talk about the demigods. We got 3 left here. And first one I'm going to put is Wandelay. I bet some people will not agree with this. They will think he's much lower, which obviously you talk about Wandelay during Legends. He's down here. He's super weak. But as the years go, 1,000, 2,000 years, he grows a lot. He's able to disguise himself throughout all these periods. He's trained by Trylos. He spends more time with Trylos than probably any other character we know about outside of the Aesira. He has clairvoyance. He can speak over long distances. 2 displays of power that really stand out are, 1, his guards. So he has 2 guards in Revelations that everyone thinks are actual humans, though obviously they're not. They're similar to Galarbrin, though obviously they're probably a weaker version of that spell since they aren't self-sustaining, but still pretty impressive that he was able to make those and keep them going for so long. The other one is the feast he creates before the final battle in Revelations. A big use of creation. Again, not a lot of characters are able to even do creation in a small amount. So, him being able to do that, again, it didn't seem like it even strained him that much. Wandelay grows a lot, and by the end, he is really, really strong. All right, 2 left. I think these 2 are going to be on the top of a lot of people's list. But in second, I am going to put Suri. So Suri, clearly the strongest human artist I think we've seen, hands down. Suri started learning the art and using it before she even knew what the art was, when she was creating fires. Arian comes and starts to give her some training, but even in the first book, she's already standing against Grendel, who we have in the Legends category. She's standing against him as a young girl with basically no training at that point. Throughout the books, we then see her create 2 Galarbrin. Another moment in Age of War, I believe, when Wandelay and Jared attack and kill Arian. Suri's able to counterattack with a huge blast of power. I think Jared says that amount of power rivaled the power of Avampartha. And interestingly enough, it wasn't even something Suri even thought about. She's so close to the art that the weave that she used to counter she just did on instinct. And by being that powerful and not even a weave she'd ever used before or even knew about, that's impressive. And then she continues to grow, and by the end of Legends, which again, she's still not even that old, she's coming back, traveling past Avampartha. Jared attacks her. She blocks it like nothing. She completely stops the Nidwald in a giant river to make Jared powerless without breaking a sweat. Interestingly, in that same scene, originally to cross the Nidwalden, she created a stone bridge, and she didn't raise stone to make it. She was using creation itself. And to make a bridge, it's not giant, but she wasn't even thinking about it, wasn't breaking a sweat doing it. She was just doing it offhand. And then finally, Fane Fenelaus I have as the number 1 strongest artist. Mortal artist. Obviously, she came around at a time the Frey were losing the war against the Durg. Trylos decided to teach Phenelaeus the art, and then Phenelaeus completely turned the entire war against, again, the Durg, who were probably the strongest between the Durg, Frey, and humans at that point. Completely turned the war. Strongest display there was creating Mount Mador. She created an entire mountain, and it wasn't a small mountain. We're talking a giant snow-peaked mountain, killing tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, depending on who you ask. Killing those dwarves in the process. And I think two things really stand out to me about this. First, when Lothian talks about it, he was saying that Phenelaeus could have killed the dwarves a bunch of other ways, a bunch of easier ways, raining down fire or some other weaves. But she decided to create the mountain, kill them with earth, which the dwarves are really close to, basically to rub it in their faces that they were powerless against her. They couldn't do anything. She could kill them and kill them however she wanted to. The other thing to note about that is in the timeline, it's believed she was Fane for about a week before she went and created Mount Mador. So this wasn't something, she wasn't training for Trylos over years and years and years. This is something she learned the art, picked it up super quick, and she's killing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands and turning an entire war. Right after she created Mount Mador as well, she chased the Durg back to Neath, and that's where King Midian created the Golem using magic, not the art, an older type of magic, probably coming from the Typhons, to create the Golem. And obviously, in any other circumstance, this Golem would have turned a battle, maybe even turned a war. But at this point, Phenelaeus is so strong that the Golem is literally just to buy time, so some more dwarves can escape, because nothing can stand against Phenelaeus at this point. So obviously these are impressive. I don't even think these are creating Mount Mador was her strongest display of power, though. I think a stronger display of power she did was when she created Avampartha. So Avampartha, huge tower. I think it's stated by Jared at one point that it has literally hundreds of balconies. So this is huge. We've seen a couple different illustrations of it, what it might have looked like. But the interesting thing here is, like Sori, she didn't raise up Avampartha from the stone in the ground. She didn't mold it using, existing materials. She used creation to create it. And this has to be the largest use of creation by a mortal. I mean, hands down. We don't see anyone even come close to this. So I think that's an even larger display of power than Mount Mador. And then we haven't even talked about Phenelaeus getting into Pyre and Nifril. But obviously, once we see her there, she is one of the strongest characters in Nifril. The only characters that really seem like they can even stand against her would be Or the dragon and Feral herself. So that's why I'm putting Phenelaeus as number 1 on this list. All right, let's switch over and see what the community thought. So let's show my list, and we will move it over to the side here. And now let's go through the community list. So at number 16, it looks like we have Sign. Ooh, a lot lower. I can see why, though. We don't see her doing a lot besides when she finally dies. If you missed the scene where they talked about her saving Lothian, definitely I could see her being lower. Number 15, we have Vidar. Again, makes sense. We really don't see him do anything with the art, so any power he might have is more speculation. 14, Gifford. Okay, that's pretty similar to what we had. Next is Ruby. All right, that's pretty similar to where we had Ruby. Number 12, Minister Dre, right next to Ruby, kind of like we did. 11 is Arista, exactly what we had Arista at. 10 is Kel Jared. All right, Still below average on this list at number 10. Definitely, I bet there's some people that ranked him quite high, so that doesn't surprise me that he's more average. Number 9 is Peridian. Again, a lot of speculation on his, so not surprising that he's much lower as he's not actually in the books. 8, we have Grindel, pretty close to what we had. 7, we have Macaretta. Okay, they had her a little higher. Maybe it was influenced as Macaretta shows up in Chronicles. Number 6, Ezra, a little bit lower than we had, but it makes sense, especially if you have a couple of people ranking him for how strong he was in Revelations versus the flashbacks to Ezra. Number 5 is Fane Lothian. Again, higher, probably because he's Fane. Number 4, Wandelay, which is pretty close to where we had him. Number 3 is Arian. So that one surprises me a bit. She's a bit higher than I would have thought, but not too far off where we had her, which actually means the last 2 are going to be our 2. Let's see who they put in second. They put Fane Fenelaeus in second. Okay. So, again, I'm not too surprised. That means Suri's number 1. Suri is a favorite of a lot of readers, so I'm not that surprised that they put Suri in front of Fane Fenelaeus, but those 2 definitely are the top 2. Well, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you had as much fun watching it as I did making it. Again, if you want to go over to Tier Maker and rank them yourselves, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, let me know what you think in the comments about these rankings. All right, talk to you later. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Be sure to subscribe and watch my other videos to learn more about the world of Elan and Riyria. Thanks.